Money flows to where it is courted, managed, and well utilized. There are underlying principles as to how to do this well. In this series of broadcasts, Sam Afemike unveils practical time-tested steps to pursuing and achieving value for money with available limited resources. Sam Afemike is a chartered accountant and a leading value for money expert. Sam is also an author with over 4 decades post-qualification experience in Africa and Europe. Mr. Afemike is the Group Managing Director of SSAC Advisory and Professionals, which has carried out several value for money reviews, audits, and value for money systems implementation in the oil and gas industry.
Welcome to Value for Money with Sam Afemike. Thank you for your continued engagement and feedback on all my online platforms. Your comments are highly welcomed. We have laid the foundation for value for money by going through the program of transaction logic and the 3 E's: economy, efficiency, which amount to doing things right, and effectiveness, which is doing the right things. We now even have a mantra which we explain as do more with less, do things right, and do the right things. Whatever you do, don't forget that. It's very important. In this episode, we'll be examining the pillars of value for money. And the first pillar we want to discuss is the 80-20 principle as it relates to value for money. The pattern underlying the 80-20 principle was discovered in 1897 by the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto as he studied the distribution of wealth in then England. The 80-20 principle asserts that a minority of inputs generate majority of results, meaning that 80% of achievements come from 20% of efforts. So you may wonder, what has this got to do with value for money? Let's stop for a second and weigh the import of this assertion that 80% of results come from 20% of inputs and look at the practical purposes, because it means that 4/5 of efforts are largely irrelevant. This obviously is contrary to expectation that inputs and outputs have a relatively linear or equal relationship. They don't have that relationship. And of course, once you understand it, you see that it has a profound effect on value for money and productivity generally. Think about it. In business, many examples of 80-20 principles have been validated. 20% of products usually account for 80% of the sales. 20% of customers account for 20% of company turnover. In society, 20% of criminals account for 80% of the crime. And 20% of motorists account for 80% of accidents. In homes, 20% of the carpet is used 80% of the time. And ladies will identify very easily with this. 20% of their clothes are used 80% of the time, like shoes, for example. There are numerous examples that we can apply to the 80-20 rule in our personal, working, and business life. The 80-20 principle is a double-edged sword with nevertheless tremendous hope to the pursuit of value for money. This is interesting, and you will ask how. Firstly, the principle brings home the evident truth that there is a tragic amount of waste everywhere in the way that nature operates in our lives, in business and society. If 80% of our inputs is useless, then there is a lot of waste. If the principal pattern of what we do in our lives means that 80% of results can only generate 20% of inputs, then it is clear that 80% of what we do or input into a transaction apply only a minority of results. This amounts to tremendous waste. On the other hand, the interesting paradox is that knowledge of such waste is wonderful news. By using the 80-20 principle creatively, it is possible to identify and avoid the use of low impact input or do something positive about it. This gives us enormous scope for improvement by re-engineering and redirecting both nature and our lives. At the heart of this is the process of substitution. Resources that have powerful effects are used as much as possible. Every resource is ideally used where it has the greatest value, and resources that have weak effects in any particular use are not used or are used sparingly. Wherever possible, wind resources are developed, improved, and trained so that they can mimic the behavior of their stronger cousins. The implication of the 1820 principle is that output, which is income, can not only be increased but can be multiplied geometrically if we can learn to make the low productivity inputs nearly as productive as highly productive inputs. The quantum leap in value can be achieved in the following two ways: creativity and determination. First, there is a need to reallocate resources from unproductive to productive uses. As it is said, find a round hole for a round peg and a square hole for a square peg, and a perfect fit for any shape in between. Experience suggests that every resource has its ideal arena where the resource can be tens or hundreds times more effective than in most other arenas. Secondly, find ways to make the unproductive resources more effective even in the existing application. The idea is to make the weak resources behave as though they were their productive cousins, to mimic, if necessary, by intricate procedures, the highly productive resources. The application of the 80-20 rule will assist you to do more with less by doing things right and doing the right things. You can if you apply the value for money principles. Please do watch out for the next episode.
Thank you for watching this episode of Value for Money with Sam Afemike. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Value for Money TV, and connect with Sam Afemike on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Direct all inquiries to info@samafemike.com or +234 818 492 2710.